back to Guitar Vocalist. The channel is all about singing and playing guitar at the same time. So if you're new here and you like how that sounds, be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It's a great way to support what I'm doing and help me put out more content. With that being said, today's topic, we're going to actually talk about how to record yourself. How you actually record yourself so you can have something you could share with people, something which sounds decent even when it's recorded only at home. And this is going to be like a full guide, a full walkthrough. I'm going to just talk about everything you're actually going to need to record yourself. And I'm even going to cover like some strategies about, the types of microphones you want to choose, or basically the types of effects you might want to choose. There's just going to be A to Z full guide for an absolute beginner. Even though this channel is geared towards guitarists and vocalists, and I will mostly cover guitar and vocal based stuff, a lot of these principles really apply to many other instruments as well. So let's just cut right to it, no BS, let's just get started. You're really going to need 5 things to record yourself. And those 5 things are actually found right here on my desk already. So firstly, you're going to need a microphone, you're going to need a cable, specifically an XLR cable, you're going to need an audio interface, and you're going to need some kind of software, some kind of digital audio workstation, or DAW for short. And I'm going to just cover these now a little bit more in depth so you know what kind of all of those you need. So to begin firstly with a microphone, which is probably the hottest topic that everyone wants to know about, there's really 2 things you have to look up. There's dynamic, and then there's condenser microphones, okay? And it depends on what you want to record. In this channel, I record my voice and I record also acoustic guitar. For both my voice and acoustic guitar, I could use this mic. It's an MXL 990. It's a large diaphragm condenser microphone. And this is sufficient to record both vocals and acoustic guitar. However, if you want to record them at the same time, you might run into some problems. It's possible to do both if you kind of place it between your guitar and your mouth. It's possible to do it with just one, and I've done it. But ideally you would want to use 2 microphones if you're going to do that. If you're recording vocals, you also want to include a pop filter, which looks like this. It's going to make your P and your B sounds not pop out into the microphone and create like a really big spike in sound. It just sounds like your microphone blew out, and it actually stays in the recording. But if you choose to record yourself with the other type of microphone, which is a dynamic microphone, then you don't actually need a pop filter because typically they're actually built into the actual shell around the microphone. But it depends, you should just check if you need it. Dynamic microphones are also good for recording just pure vocals and also for electric guitar through an amplifier. So if you're recording electric guitar, you're going to want to use a dynamic microphone and not a condenser microphone. Now, microphone theory could go on for ages, but just remember these rules of thumb, and I think that you can seriously just go online onto a site like Guitar Center or Musician's Friend or any of those big sites, or Amazon for that matter, and you could just simply type in a dynamic microphone for vocals. And I want to just shout out some different microphones right now just so you know. There's for example, under the condenser side, there's Rode NT1, there's MXL 990, which I use right now. And then on the dynamic microphone, there's a Shure SM58 for vocals, or SM57 for instruments. And there's also AKG D5, for example, which is a dynamic microphone. But there's many of them out there. Just look at the reviews, just find one in your price range and that you think you're willing to shell out the money for, and just get it. It shouldn't cost more than $100 for a beginner microphone anyway. Now the second thing I talked about was the cable. There's really no secrets here. It's an XLR cable. It looks like this. It's got the little 3 prongs, and which leads me to the third thing, which is the audio interface that you need. The audio interface looks like this. This is a Behringer FCA 1616. You don't need to get this one. You could try looking at something like Focusrite Scarlett. I'm just shouting out names. Do your research, but basically what you're looking at is having these ports, and how many ports do you need? This one has 4 inputs. And this microphone goes right into these inputs. And this is how much we want to record at once. So I don't ever need more than 4 for just myself. But you might need 2 inputs if you want to record guitar and voice at once. So that's the main thing you want to consider. Another thing is make sure that whatever you're getting has phantom power. It's a little thing that says plus 48V right here. Some microphones, they need your audio interface to provide them with phantom power so they can run. So just check if the microphone you're using requires it, and check if your interface has that. Besides that, it's just a bunch of fancy volume knobs and a few settings, but just pick one. Again, go on Amazon, wherever, pick something that's just high rated and you can use it. You're gonna need a computer, like I said. You just need a computer. It's 2021 right now. Any computer can record audio at this point. You'll need the computer to be a special designated audio computer to record at home. Your home computer works just fine. You're just gonna install some software on it and that's it. And now with the software, if you're an absolute beginner, you don't need to pay any money. You could just get this one called Audacity. It's completely free and it has the basics to play around, but you can also try several others. I mean, if you're more into something like electronic music, you can try something like FL Studio. I like to use that. You could also try Ableton. But if you're more into something like old school, you could try Pro Tools. Pro Tools is a really good one. There's also many of them out there. So just do your research on which one you want to use. Some of those are paid that I mentioned, but a lot of them have free versions to get started. So I think there's a Pro Tools Lite or Pro Tools First. Also a lot of them have free trials. So just look these up and just pick one. They all do the same thing. It's about which interface do you like most. You could do a few free trials to see which one's most intuitive for you, or you could just look up people that you like and follow and just see what audio interface do they use, if you know, and then just simply copy them. It really doesn't matter. You just need to pick one. Now for the actual recording itself, what you need to do is you need to think about microphone placement. And really this is kind of a trial and error, but a good rule of thumb for vocals is you don't want to be in your face like this, because that leaves you with very little room for moving your face. You need to turn up the input volume and have it be something like 6 to 12 inches from your face, because then if I do this, it doesn't change the acoustics that much. But if I have it set to being sensitive and right here, it's going to really change it, and I'll need a lot of compression to kind of make up for the changes in volume happening as I record myself. Typically 6 to 12 inches from whatever you're recording is a good rule of thumb. So your face, your acoustic guitar, your amp, but you need to like play around with it. So sometimes you want to place it more on the edge of the speaker of the amp if it's an amp. Sometimes you might want to place it more towards facing the fretboard, sometimes more towards facing the body of the guitar if you want a more boomy sound. This is all trial and error, but you could just follow the rule of thumb of 6 to 12 inches. And for your first few recordings, experiment and you'll find out what the right method is. And then for the actual hookup, obviously you start with the mic plugs into the XLR cable, the XLR cable plugs into the audio interface, the audio interface plugs into your computer via either USB or FireWire, probably USB, and then when it gets plugged into your computer, you just start up the digital audio workstation or the software and you just select the proper microphone input. You make sure that you're selecting your actual microphone input, and you'll have the instructions in your digital audio interface. You'll have the instructions in the instruction booklet of whatever you bought, and then you just start recording. And a good practice is to record one track at a time and to have a click track. Most softwares run a click track, a metronome set to a certain beat, and you start bottom up, which means you start with the rhythm section and move up to lead. So drums before bass, before rhythm guitar, before lead guitar, before vocals. And piano falls around the lead guitar section. So you probably want to record rhythm guitar before piano or keyboard or any electronics. Now, the most important thing you want to think about is once you listen to the sound of your recording, does the recording actually sound good? And if not, what I urge you to do is play around with your microphone placement, play around with how you're playing the guitar. Is it loud? Is it quiet? Play around with your voice. Play around with all of these analog things that you can control before moving to trying to correct the sound using any digital means. So before doing any special effects, anything like compression, reverb, any of that stuff, don't try and correct something that you could just correct by re-recording properly. And if your performance wasn't good, for example, you sang a little bit off, or maybe you just didn't like the power of your voice there, or maybe you just misplayed a few chords or something, and you didn't hit the strings hard enough, the dynamics were bad, I urge you to rinse and repeat until you've gotten that part down pat, because after that, you can actually enhance it with digital effects, but you should never try to actually replace a bad performance or make up for a bad performance using digital effects. Another thing that you might notice right now is that this room I'm in right now is pretty echoey. And that's because this is the only furniture in the room. It's actually a new house I just moved into. And there isn't any proofing in the walls, any soundproofing. I don't have carpeting. I don't even have drapes. So all of that will help kill the sound. And you want to try and pick to be in a room with more furniture, carpeting, some kind of sound insulation. Because that way, you're gonna basically make sure that you're only recording what you want to record and there's no bouncing back and forth and it sounds good. The only exception maybe to this is if you're doing a live performance and you want it to sound more ringy, but if you're trying to do like an actual recording that you can share that's not meant to be a live performance, then I recommend you look into how to do that. So basically find some rugs, some carpets. You could do some DIY sound insulation for your room. Have drapes around your windows. Where are you gonna point your mic? Where's the back of the mic gonna be? Is the mic picking up sounds from outside? Play with all of this before even thinking about digital effects. And now for digital effects, I'm gonna give you basically 4, and in order tell you what to do. First thing you do before anything else, you've already made sure that everything sounds good, you've recorded it, mic placement is good, things sound okay, but you really want to bring the performance together. First thing you do is look at volume levels. You open up a mixer plugin and you basically just make sure that the sound levels are all how they need to be. The vocals aren't too loud, the drums aren't too quiet, everything is good. You just play with the fader knobs, just the volume, that's it. That's the first step. Before you do anything else, play with just the volume. The second step is to play with the EQ. And when you play with the EQ, think of it like a mini volume within each instrument. So the volume of the instruments is your volume knobs, but the EQ is the volume of the frequencies within each instrument track. So if you want more highs or lows or mids, you can play with that part. And for the EQ, this is beyond the scope of the video, you'll have to look up some stuff on EQ. But a general rule of thumb that I like to give is don't make drastic changes. Just make small changes and just see how it sounds. You really shouldn't have to do too much decibel changes in EQ. I like to change in just increments of 1.5 decibels whenever I'm messing with EQ. Step number 3, which is like magic if you get the hang of how to do this, is compression. Compression is how you make it sound like a true flowing recording. So you compress each track and then you can see how basically if there's parts where it gets too loud, it's gonna just go right back down to being quiet. It does it automatically. It's like an internal volume control. And it makes sure that everything sounds uniform throughout the entire song and one part doesn't jump out more than another. You're gonna wanna look up some guides on compression. Maybe sometime I'll make one. Please, by the way, post in the comments below if there's any one of these topics you want me to expand on. But yeah, you basically want to look at compression. So first volume, then EQ, then compression. And last is everything else. Okay, in theory, you don't even need to do all the other stuff, but it sounds much better if you add other stuff like reverb, delay, and then some other effects and so on. But for now, I suggest that if you're a beginner, you're an absolute beginner, first focus on just volume, then EQ, then compression, and then you can start looking at guides for adding other effects. And then at the end of this all, I recommend you to just do something which is like, it's like mastering is what it's called, but I'm gonna just give you like a super shortcut to mastering for a brand new beginner. And that is listen to a song that sounds like the song you recorded, and then make sure the volume of your performance sounds like that. And even you can do some EQ afterwards or compression afterwards in the mastering phase to make it sound like that recording more, like that style more, a little bit. But again, don't make drastic changes, just little increments of 1.5 decibels at a time is a good way to start. Make sure that every time you're messing with recording, that you change one variable at a time and that you know what you're changing and why you're changing it. Don't just change stuff and be like, oh, that sounded good. It doesn't work that way, because if you just change one variable at a time and you're like, okay, I added compression here and I set it to this exact parameter, then you know what you did. But if you're like, oh, I accidentally stumbled upon a good sound with a combination of compression, mic being here and this being there, if you don't know what you actually did, then you can't replicate it. And you need to be able to replicate it for future songs that you're going to want to record. So that's really it. That's the basics. I gave you a lot of stuff that you can Google, a lot of stuff to work with. But actually, that is everything you need as an absolute beginner to record yourself, audio-wise. So let me know down in the comments if this was helpful, if you have any questions. And also, let me know, maybe I can make another guide like this on video recording also. And I could go in depth on any of these topics. So thanks for joining, and until next time, guys.